Hello and welcome to the presentation. I'm going to be taking you through the talk titled Benefits of Single Ledger Continuous Accounting for Breweries. So let's just go ahead and get started. My name is Andrew Koehring and I'm the Brewery Edition Product Manager for Crafted ERP at Doozy Solutions. But prior to that, I was a Production Manager at Seismic Brewing in Santa Rosa, and then a variety of roles at Bell's in Kalamazoo. And in that time, my experience in beer production is, on the floor doing operations, engineering and industrial automation, kind of working with raw materials and planning, production scheduling, forecasting, and then kind of finally enterprise systems, which is one of the things I'm here to talk about today. Don't really want to undercut myself here, but I am going to stress that I'm not an accountant, and I think part of what I want to get across here is the value of production and operations people being able to understand their accounting system, work with the finance team, and I think a really good system can kind of help make that a lot more approachable for someone who didn't come up through the finance background. And so we can kind of talk about some of that today, see some examples. So just a bit about what I'm going to be showing you and where I'm from. Doozy Solutions is a consulting firm that are NetSuite experts, and that's really just what we focus on. NetSuite's a great platform, and we're just putting our strength behind it to develop and implement solutions on that platform for a variety of industries and use cases, but in particular, Crafted is our product that is specifically focused towards beverage manufacturing, in particular beer, wine, and spirits. And so obviously my background is in the beer side, and I'm spending a lot of time on that, but there's a lot of cross-industry value to be gained from understanding wine and spirits as well. And so we bring that expertise on NetSuite, we bring that expertise from industry to these kinds of ERP systems. So to get started, I just want to do some definitions. Continuous accounting, kind of one of the main things on the title slide. And just to define that, I'm going to say that that's distributing the workload across an entire period, not just at close. So your necessary financial transactions are happening on a daily basis, and a lot of them can be automated because much of it's very repetitive. It doesn't really require a whole lot of analysis or financial background. And given the right system, a lot of this can be done by people who aren't in the accounting department. If you're just doing a basic transaction that has certain accounting impacts, that can just be done behind the scenes, out of the way, and that saves someone from having to do a separate accounting task, financial related thing later. The other thing I kind of want to talk about with continuous accounting is that having a tight coupling between your manufacturing, inventory, and financial systems. When those things are kind of all working together, you don't have to worry about batch transactions to catch things up. Integrations between systems can really be a significant obstacle because at best they run daily. Sometimes it's a batch export, and again, you're trying to catch up on a whole month or at least a few weeks of transactions. So the more that those all live in the same place, function together, the more you can get towards this continuous accounting approach. Along with that is the concept of having just a single ledger. Most accounting systems use this today. It's a double entry, single general ledger. However, if your financial system is, this great single GL, but you also have a separate purchasing system, a separate manufacturing system that, again, kind of tying back to that first point that maybe aren't a part of that accounting system, you're effectively almost creating separate ledgers that have to be linked and integrated, and transactions maybe don't update the best. So in a way, these distributed systems kind of create multiple ledgers again. So having this all in one house, having it all work together is, really beneficial, and I'm hoping to show you some of that today. So talking about beer and costing in particular, I want to start with when we receive our raw materials, because that's really, from a chronological perspective, that's the first time that we really start to apply costs to our inventory that's going to become our finished goods. So, in Crafted, there are standard purchase orders that you might find in every system, and you can receive against that purchase order. And this is going to be happening probably on your receiving dock, maybe with your purchasing department. Certainly not going to be your accounting people, maybe tracking lot numbers and counting things on a pallet. So having this initiate from the actual place it happens saves us having to write it down, saves us paper records, saves us lag in getting things entered in current. So when someone on the dock or in purchasing goes ahead and receives that inventory, there is immediately in Crafted in NetSuite a GL impact. So that person is posting to the general ledger. They don't know about it. They don't even have to. But what we can see here is just the total of our accrued purchases, and then these individual line items for the three raw materials that happen to be on this receipt. And I do just kind of want to highlight this because we're going to follow this example through the rest of this little presentation. This third line is 5 bales of rice hulls at $20. And so we'll just kind of play with that example over the next few minutes, so keep that in mind. So it's great that the materials showed up. We had someone receive them. Our inventory is current immediately, but that doesn't mean that the vendor bill always comes with that. Sometimes the vendor bill shows up at a different time. Great, we can handle that. But also maybe our purchasing system didn't have the right unit rate for that rice hull bale item. Maybe the price book updated, maybe it was misentered or something like that to begin with. These things happen. We need to be able to adapt to that. On top of that, we also have a freight charge that came with that delivery, and we want to associate that into our actual inventory value as a landed cost. So in a lot of systems, you might have to book a reversing entry against that original receipt. Maybe you would have to delete it entirely. Maybe you couldn't do any of this if those rice hulls had already been used in a brew. The great thing is the flexibility of NetSuite's edit button. So we can just go in and directly edit that item receipt, make it cost things out the way we want, and then proceed to billing and catching everything up. But we aren't limited based on timing or if the materials have been used. We can just change that transaction in a couple seconds and everything catches up. The costing updates, got a note here, you can have those run hourly, at least daily. So again, everything is going to be very current. If you go and catch this up, you're going to update the costs of the materials you received. It's also going to chase through to any production that has received those materials. So again, everything's up to date, everything's very easy and flexible. So let's take a look at an example of the GL impact after we've maybe made that change. So we've got a few additional lines here that the totals are different. One, we can see that we added a little bit of cost to those rice hull bales. Again, let's say that we had an old price and the new one wasn't a mistake. We just hadn't corrected our system, so we changed that cost. And then we have an overall freight that we want to allocate across each of these lines. And we can do that by quantity or value or weight. In this case, I think we're doing it by quantity, but regardless, the rice hull line is absorbing an additional $30 or so of freight charge that is going to get us to a landed cost per bale of $28.15. So again, we can do that with the edit button, apply the landed cost feature, change a unit rate, and everything catches up. So the next step in costing is, we're going to use this in a production order. And so we're going to take this into a brew, and we can see the example here that when we issue these materials to this production order, it's at that $28.15 that we calculated as the landed cost that had been updated after we edited that transaction. So your costs are flowing through into all of your production, you're capturing freight, and getting a very real sense of margin. And we'll see more of the reporting features later on. So then the final piece of the production order anyway, we use a work in process model where all the raw materials, any overhead labor, routing type charges get put into WIP as we progress through the entire brew and ferment. At the end of that, when we're ready to call it finished goods, finished liquid beer inventory anyway, we can take all of that value out of our work in process account and move it to bright beer inventory. So we're just absorbing all of those costs throughout that 2 weeks or whatever we want to call it from brew to bright, and we see the ability here to apply things like labor, rent, utilities, that sort of thing. So diving a little bit deeper on allocating those production costs, ERP in general and Crafted as well uses routings and cost templates that are pretty standard. So you set up the most the average number of hours that you want to ascribe to a particular production operation. You assign rates to that, and whether that's an hourly labor rate or a particular utility rate, you can kind of get started on those. But how do you track those? How do you keep them current to what your actual labor and utility spends are? So Crafted has a procedure for this that we help our clients get started on. That first, at the end of a period, you can review your actual expenses and see what you've spent by department, what you've spent on particular utility items, and determine how much of that you want applied directly into your production. Maybe you don't want to do all of it. Like, that's a decision that you can make every month. If you have a month where certain machinery is down for repairs, for upgrades, you might still be spending on utilities and labor, but you're not directly producing materials. And so you get the choice every month how much you want to soak up into your eventually into your finished goods. So from that decision, you can then move on to look at the total routing hours by charge item that we get to through just the normal manufacturing process. So how many hours did we log on the brew house? How many hours did we log in the cellar or on the centrifuge? So looking at all those, you can then do the simple math of divide the total expense dollars by the total hours that you've actually used to get an updated rate for that period. Crafted has a custom workflow to automate going back and applying these new rates to all the production in the month. So in just a few minutes, not days or hours, you can go through your entire period, update your production costs, and again, within the time it takes to just recalculate, run that costing engine, you have your current inventory values, and whether that's inventory that's in bright in tank, whether that's finished goods that you have in the cold box, it's always being updated. So I talked a little bit, I've been talking about kind of the nuts and bolts of how this works, but the main benefit that we get out of having this very detailed, very driven down to the per transaction level when it comes to all this financial data is that we can do financial reporting almost immediately. We know it's current, we know it's accurate because we can trace it out to every transaction that we want to review. There's no mystery to it. So one example is some ToolKit saved searches that we create in NetSuite that allow you to pick a particular item and break out the component categories and look at how many dollars land in each of those buckets. Look at that as a percentage of the overall. And every time you do production, every time you update costs, every time you maybe use raw materials at a different price, these are going to accurately reflect what you're spending and what you're producing. So you get direct visibility into what are the categories of expense that you have in your product. The other thing that you can do is track this over time. So here's just a quick example report of looking back to December of last year. We can see that for this half barrel item, our cost was being calculated at $42.98. But then we can see as we kind of move forward into later December of last year, and then some sample dates there in the spring, we're bringing that down. We're shaving off a little bit per unit, which is good. And so you have the ability to monitor these trends, and then maybe kind of referencing the previous slide, if something is changing, you can dive in and see exactly what category might be the reason for the change, whether it's up or down. This also provides the ability to instantly report gross margins per SKU. So if you're calculating and you know what your total cost is on every transaction, you also know your total revenue. So you immediately have access to a simple profit calculation. Again, something that you can track and trend on and be monitoring, making sure that everything, the financial health of the brewery is as it needs to be. The other thing I'll show here real quick, let me minimize or get out of full screen, is just an example. I took an animated screenshot here of income report within Crafted, where you can very quickly, and you'll kind of watch this break out, you have the ability to just with a few clicks change your overall report and break it out by department, break it up by accounting period. With one click on any of these individual rows, cells, whatever you want to call them, you can drive into the actual transactions that are generating that. So it just, again, takes away a lot of that mystery. You don't have to wonder about what transactions were included in this total or not. You have the ability to drill down very quickly, immediately return back to the summary, slice and dice the report in a different way, and again, stay on top of all of the details so that you can monitor your costs, monitor your revenues, and make sure that everything is performing as you expect. So then, just back to the final slides here. Thank you for your attention. Thanks for stopping by. Do want to point out that if you're interested in Crafted ERP, we've got a brochure at the link stated right there. We also have a starter package that we offer that's kind of specifically targeted towards the smaller brewery that might want to transition to kind of a more robust accounting and inventory system. So the details are available there. If you're interested in arranging a demo or anything else, please reach out to us via email or some of the more common social media platforms. And again, thank you and have a great day.